The crystal champagne flutes caught the morning light as my sister Madison raised hers high above the elegant brunch table. To me, she declared with that familiar smirk, and to people who know how to stay in their lane, 20 pairs of eyes swiveled toward me. I felt their weight, but kept my expression neutral as I lifted my mimosa. To people who now have 30 days to find a new apartment, I announced clearly, since I just sold the condo you live in. The silence was absolute. Madison's sterling silver fork clattered against her plate. My mother's whisper cut through the frozen moment. "What did you do?" I took a slow, deliberate sip of my mimosa, letting the bubbles tickle my throat. 3 months before that memorable brunch, I sat in the dusty back office of Grandmother Dorothy's estate lawyer, surrounded by boxes of yellowing documents. Mr. Harrison, who'd served our family for 40 years, handed me a sealed envelope with shaking hands. "Your grandmother insisted this be given to you personally, Sean. She said you'd know when the time was right to open it." The paper inside was dated just 2 weeks before Dorothy passed. Her elegant handwriting, though trembling with age, was unmistakable. "My dearest Sean," it began, "if you're reading this, then Madison has likely continued her deceptions even after my death. The waterfront condo at 92 Marina Boulevard was always meant for you, not her. Check the county records. Check the safe deposit box at First National number 473. The truth has a way of surfacing just like cream in fresh coffee." My hands trembled as I drove to the bank. The safe deposit box contained more than property deeds. There were original documents, copies of intercepted letters from Harrison's office to me, and most damning of all examples of Madison's signature practicing mine. She hadn't just stolen mail, she'd been perfecting my signature for months before Dorothy died. But nothing prepared me for what I found next. Behind the legal papers was Dorothy's journal, and tucked inside were photographs of a hidden panel in the condo's master bedroom closet. Dorothy's notes revealed what lay behind it, her collection of jewelry brought from Prague before the war, pieces that had belonged to her own grandmother. "I showed Madison once," Dorothy had written. "The greed in her eyes told me everything. I sealed it the next day and never spoke of it again." I contacted a private investigator that afternoon. Within 2 weeks, Marcus Chen had uncovered a trail of small transactions. Madison had somehow discovered the panel. She'd been removing pieces one at a time, selling them to dealers across the state. The investigator showed me photos from security cameras, Madison entering high-end pawn shops in San Francisco, Los Angeles, even Las Vegas. Each piece she sold was worth between $20,000 and $50,000. By Marcus's calculation, she'd already disposed of nearly $2 million worth of our great-great-grandmother's legacy. The betrayal cut deeper than the theft. These weren't just valuable objects. Each piece carried history. The sapphire brooch that great-great-grandmother Elsa wore when she escaped Prague. The ruby earrings that had been hidden in a flower jar during the occupation. The diamond necklace that paid for safe passage for 3 families. Madison had been selling our heritage, our survival story, funding her lavish lifestyle with the courage of our ancestors. I spent the next weeks building my case. Every receipt, every forged document, every lie Madison had told was documented. Harrison helped me file the proper paperwork to reclaim the property. The sale to a tech executive from Seattle was arranged quietly, with closing set for 1 week after Madison's 29th birthday party. I insisted on a 30-day evacuation clause, knowing I'd need to give her legal notice. Tyler, my patient husband, watched me transform from hurt to determined. "She's been doing this for years," I told him one evening, spreading the evidence across our dining table. "This isn't just about money. It's about power. Control. She's been controlling our family's narrative, our mother's affection, even our grandmother's legacy." The depth of Madison's deception became clearer each day. She told our extended family that Dorothy had chosen her as the favorite. She'd portrayed herself as the devoted granddaughter while painting me as distant and money-hungry. Every family gathering, every holiday dinner, she'd carefully crafted her image while undermining mine. The waterfront condo was just her stage, and she'd been performing for years. But what truly solidified my resolve was finding Dorothy's final letter to Harrison, dated the day before she entered hospice. "That child has a darkness in her," she'd written about Madison. "I've watched it grow despite Grace's blind devotion. Sean has the strength to face it. When I'm gone, help her find the truth. The family's future depends on someone finally standing up to Madison's manipulations." I chose Madison's birthday brunch as my moment, not out of cruelty, but because I knew she'd have an audience. Madison never could resist performing for a crowd. This time, though, the script would be mine. The morning of Madison's 29th birthday arrived with unusual January warmth in San Francisco. My phone buzzed at 6:45 with the first of what would be many messages from my sister. "Reminder, brunch is at 11 sharp at Botanical Garden Bistro. Dress code is elegant casual. Please don't wear those dated pumps from your wedding. This is my day." I scrolled through the group chat she'd created weeks ago for her birthday planning. 23 people had been subjected to her daily updates, outfit requirements, and behavioral expectations. "Please remember to post photos to Instagram with my birthday hashtag. No children allowed. This includes babies. Gifts should be from my registry only." The messages revealed someone desperate to control every detail, every moment, every perception. Tyler emerged from the shower towel around his waist, water droplets still clinging to his shoulders. His expression darkened when he saw me reading Madison's messages. "I need to tell you something," he said, sitting on our bed. "I didn't want to add to your stress with everything else, but you should know before today." My stomach tightened as he continued. "At our wedding reception, when you were changing into your going-away outfit, Madison cornered me in the hallway outside the bridal suite. She was drunk, but not that drunk. She pressed herself against me, said you'd never be able to satisfy someone like me, said she could show me things you were too uptight to try." The revelation shouldn't have shocked me, but it did. Our wedding day, the one day that was supposed to be purely ours, and she'd tried to poison it. Tyler pulled me close. I pushed her away, told her she disgusted me. But Sean, the look in her eyes when I rejected her, it was like staring into an empty well. No shame, no embarrassment, just cold calculation, already planning her next move. As I processed this, my phone rang. Natalie's name appeared on the screen. My best friend since college, and now a successful real estate attorney. She'd been handling the legal aspects of the condo sale. "Everything's set," she confirmed. "The buyer's wire transfer cleared yesterday. You officially own the condo as of 9 this morning, and the sale closes Monday. The 30-day notice is completely legal and binding." "There's something else," Natalie added, her voice taking on an edge I rarely heard. "Remember when you asked me to look into those weird emails you got from potential clients who suddenly ghosted you? I had my tech guy trace the IP addresses. Sean, they all came from Madison's laptop. She's been sabotaging your interior design business for at least 3 years." I sank onto my vanity chair, staring at my reflection. The evidence kept mounting. Natalie continued. "She created fake email accounts, reached out to your potential clients, pretending to be former customers, and told them horrible things. That you stole money, that you had bed bugs in your fabric samples, that you slept with married clients. She even sent photos of botched design jobs she pulled from fail blogs, claiming they were your work." My hands shook as I applied my makeup. Every rejection, every lost opportunity, every time I'd questioned my talent and ability. Madison had orchestrated it all. The design firm that had mysteriously withdrawn their job offer. The wealthy Pacific Heights couple who'd canceled our consultation at the last minute. The magazine feature that had inexplicably fallen through. Madison's invisible hand had been pulling strings I hadn't even known existed. I've documented everything, Natalie assured me. Screenshots, IP traces the whole paper trail. It's enough for a lawsuit, maybe even criminal charges for cyber harassment and defamation. I chose my outfit carefully, a cream silk blouse that had belonged to Dorothy, paired with a navy blazer and the pearl necklace she'd given me for my 16th birthday. The pearls Madison had always coveted, but Dorothy had refused to let her touch. Pearls absorb the essence of their wearer, Dorothy had said. These must remain pure. Tyler drove us to the restaurant, his hand steady on mine. Whatever happens today, I'm proud of you. It's time someone stood up to her. Through the car window, I watched the city pass by, thinking of all the opportunities stolen, all the dreams deferred because of one person's pathological need to dominate and destroy. My phone buzzed again. Another group message from Madison. For those asking about gifts, I've updated my registry to include investment pieces only. Please remember, this is my golden year before 30, so gift accordingly. Can't wait to celebrate with people who truly appreciate me. I almost laughed at the irony. She wanted investment pieces while living in a condo obtained through fraud wearing jewelry stolen from our grandmother's hidden collection, building her lifestyle on a foundation of lies. Today, her golden year would turn to lead. As we pulled into the restaurant's valet station, I spotted several familiar cars. Madison had invited everyone who mattered in our social circle, our family, even some of my former clients she'd secretly turned against me. Perfect. The more witnesses to truth, the harder it would be for her to spin her web of lies afterward. Ready? Tyler asked, squeezing my hand one final time. I touched Dorothy's pearls, feeling their cool smoothness against my fingertips. I've been ready for 29 years. The botanical garden bistro stretched before us like something from a magazine spread its glass walls, revealing the carefully orchestrated scene within. Madison had positioned herself at the head of a long table decorated with white orchids and gold accents, holding court like a queen among her subjects. The January sun streaming through the greenhouse ceiling created a natural spotlight effect, which I'm certain she'd calculated when choosing her seat. What stopped me mid-step wasn't the extravagant decorations or the crowd of familiar faces. It was the flash of green at Madison's throat. Dorothy's missing emerald necklace, the one she'd reported stolen after the funeral, cascaded down Madison's chest in all its Art Deco glory. $500,000 of our grandmother's most prized possession, worn as casually as costume jewelry to a birthday brunch. Sean, Madison's voice carried across the space with practiced sweetness. So glad you could make it, though I specifically said elegant, casual, not office wear. Her laugh tinkled like breaking glass as several guests turned to assess my outfit. I made my way through the obstacles of chairs and air kisses, Tyler's steady presence behind me. Our mother Grace sat to Madison's right, her face bearing that familiar expression of anxious appeasement she'd perfected over the years. She half rose when she saw me, then seemed to think better of it, settling back into her chair with a nervous adjustment of her napkin. "That's a beautiful necklace, Madison," I said, taking my assigned seat strategically placed at the far end of the table. "Grandmother's, isn't it? The one you said was stolen." Madison's hand flew to the emeralds, but her smile never wavered. "Oh, it's a reproduction. I had it made because I miss the original so much." Touching really how I'm keeping her memory alive while some family members seem to have forgotten her entirely. Before I could respond, Uncle Robert appeared at my elbow. Dorothy's younger brother had aged significantly since the funeral, his once robust frame now stooped with something beyond years. "Sean, might I have a word privately?" Madison's eyes tracked us as we moved toward the restaurant's tropical plant display. Robert's hands trembled as he pulled out his phone, showing me a screen full of spreadsheets. "I need your help," he whispered urgently. "I've been investigating discrepancies at the family company. Someone's been siphoning money through fake vendor accounts. $500,000 over 2 years." My blood chilled as he continued. The forensic accountants traced it back. The accounts were opened using your social security number, your signature. The police were ready to arrest you last month, but I convinced them to wait while I dug deeper. Madison, I breathed the pieces clicking into place. Robert nodded grimly. She had access to everything through her position. But Sean, she was clever. Every trail leads back to you. If I hadn't known you since birth, if I didn't trust Dorothy's judgment of character, you'd be in federal prison right now. The magnitude of Madison's scheme staggered me. This wasn't just sibling rivalry or petty theft. She'd attempted to frame me for embezzlement to destroy not just my career, but my freedom. Do you have proof it was her? Working on it, Robert said. My IT guy found digital footprints, but we need more. The FBI wants something concrete before they'll shift focus from you to her. He gripped my arm with surprising strength. Be careful today. A cornered animal is dangerous, and Madison's running out of corners. We returned to find Madison regaling the table with stories of her business success. It's really about having vision, she proclaimed, gesturing with her champagne flute. While some people are content with mediocrity, I've always reached higher. Take my charity foundation, for example. We've raised over $2 million for underprivileged children this year alone. I nearly choked on my water. Natalie and I had researched that foundation. It existed on paper, but no money ever reached any children. It was a front way to launder the money from Dorothy's sold jewelry and the embezzled company funds. The audacity of bragging about it surrounded by family and friends who donated generously, thinking they were helping children, made my stomach turn. Speaking of success, Madison continued, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when about to deliver a barb. Sean, how's your little decorating hobby going? Still struggling to find clients. It's so hard to break into established fields without proper connections or talent. Several guests shifted uncomfortably. Everyone knew I'd graduated with honors from design school, that I'd won awards for my work before my business mysteriously began failing. But Madison had spent years painting me as a failure, and challenging that narrative publicly was exactly what she expected me to avoid. Actually, I said calmly, I've recently discovered why I was losing clients. It seems someone was impersonating me online, sending horrible messages to prospects. Cybercrime is such a serious federal offense these days, isn't it? Madison's perfectly painted lips tightened almost imperceptibly. How paranoid! Next you'll be blaming others for your lack of talent, too. Oh, I don't blame others for things they haven't done, I replied, meeting her gaze steadily. I believe in accountability, in truth, in justice. Don't you? The moment stretched taut between us, a lifetime of rivalry compressed into seconds. Around us, guests sensed the shift in atmosphere. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the waitstaff seemed to hover at a distance, instinctively avoiding our table's growing tension. Madison broke first, turning to our cousin Emma with a brilliant smile. Emma, you must tell everyone about your promotion. Senior marketing director at 32, how impressive. But her hand shook slightly as she reached for her champagne, and I noticed she'd drained her glass twice already, despite the brunch having barely begun. The appetizers arrived, beautiful presentations of smoked salmon and avocado that might as well have been cardboard for all the attention they received. Everyone was watching Madison and me, waiting for the next volley in a war they didn't fully understand was being waged. Tyler's hand found mine under the table, a silent reminder of support. At the head of the table, Madison laughed too loudly at someone's joke, the emeralds at her throat catching the light like green fire. Dorothy's emeralds worn by a thief playing at being an heiress. The main course was about to be served, but I knew the real feast would be the truth served cold after years of preparation. Madison's champagne flute shattered the orchestrated perfection of her birthday celebration as completely as her composure. For 3 heartbeats after my announcement about selling the condo, the only sound was the tinkle of settling glass shards and the distant clink of dishes from the kitchen. Then Madison's face transformed from porcelain perfection to something raw and ugly. "You're lying!" she hissed, half rising from her chair. The emerald necklace swung wildly as she moved, catching light like a snake preparing to strike. "That condo is mine. Grandmother promised it to me. Everyone here knows it." I reached into my purse with deliberate calm, extracting a leather folder. "Then you won't mind if I share the actual documentation. Mr. Harrison was kind enough to provide copies of grandmother's real will, not the forgery you filed with the court." Forgery. Our mother's voice cracked on the word. Grace gripped the edge of the table as if it might steady her world. "Madison, what is she talking about?" Madison's perfectly manicured nails scraped against the tablecloth as she lunged for the documents. Her sudden movement sent champagne glasses, toppling golden liquid, spreading across the white linen like spilled secrets. "Give those to me. You have no right." "Actually, I have every right." I held the papers just out of her reach. "As the legal owner of 92 Marina Boulevard, the sale closed this morning. The new owners take possession in 30 days. "No!" Madison's shriek brought the restaurant manager hurrying over, his professional smile faltering as he took in the scene. Broken glass, spilled champagne, and Madison, standing now, her body trembling with rage. "Mom, is everything all right here?" he asked carefully. "Everything's fine," I answered before Madison could speak. "Just sharing some overdue family news." Madison whirled on me. "You conniving little bitch! You've always been jealous of me, always trying to steal what's mine." "Steal?" I kept my voice level, though my heart hammered. "Like you stole grandmother's jewelry from the hidden panel. Like you've been selling pieces worth millions while telling everyone they were stolen." Gasps rippled around the table. Aunt Patricia's hand flew to her mouth. Cousin James nearly dropped his mimosa, but it was Uncle Robert's steady nod that gave me strength to continue. "Or maybe," I said, "we should discuss the stealing you've done from the family company, $500,000 through fraudulent vendor accounts, all traced back to my stolen identity." "You can't prove anything!" Madison's voice rose to a pitch that had other diners turning to stare. Her carefully styled hair began escaping its pins, giving her a wild appearance that matched her desperate eyes. Madison, sit down," Grace pleaded. "Please, let's discuss this calmly." But calm had left the building the moment I'd announced the condo sale. Madison grabbed the folder from my hands, tearing at the papers inside. Legal documents scattered across the table, falling into the remains of barely touched eggs, Benedict, and fruit parfaits. "Is this true?" A new voice cut through the chaos. Jake Morrison. Madison's boyfriend of 6 months stood slowly. His expression had changed from confused to something harder, more professional. "Madison, I need you to answer me. Is what your sister's saying true?" Madison laughed high and brittle. "Jake, baby, you know me. Would I do something like that? She's obviously lost her mind. Jealousy makes people crazy." Jake reached into his jacket, and for a surreal moment, I thought he might be pulling out a ring box. Madison must have thought the same, because her face lit up with desperate hope. Instead, he withdrew a leather badge holder, flipping it open with practiced ease. "Special Agent Jake Morrison, FBI Financial Crimes Division." His voice carried new authority, silencing even Madison's sputtering protests. "Madison, I think we need to have a serious conversation." The revelation hit the table like a physical force. Madison stumbled backward, knocking into her chair. What? Jake, this isn't funny." "No," he agreed. "It's not. I've been investigating irregular financial patterns connected to several charity foundations. Yours kept coming up." He glanced at me with something like apology. "I'm sorry for the deception, but I needed to be certain before taking official action." Madison's face cycled through emotions like a broken slot machine. Disbelief, rage, fear, calculation. "You've been investigating me while we dating." Jake's expression remained professionally neutral. "The relationship was real, Madison. My feelings were real, which makes this so much harder." He pulled out his phone, fingers flying over the screen. But the evidence is overwhelming. The charity fraud alone is enough for federal charges. This is insane. Madison grabbed champagne from a nearby bottle, drinking straight from it like water. You're all insane, Mom, tell them. Tell them I didn't. But Grace sat, frozen tears streaming down her face as she stared at the scattered legal documents. One had landed in front of her, water-stained but readable. Her finger traced Dorothy's genuine signature, so different from the forgery she had accepted without question. My God, she whispered. It's true, all of it. Madison, how could you? The question hung in the air like incense, heavy and choking. Around us, birthday guests sat in stunned silence. Some had phones out, probably recording the spectacular downfall of someone they'd called friend. Others stared at their plates, uncomfortable witnesses to a family's unraveling. Madison's legs seemed to give out. She sank into her chair, the fight draining from her like air from a punctured balloon. Her perfect makeup was ruined mascara, tracking dark rivers down her cheeks. The emerald necklace, Dorothy's precious heirloom, lay heavy against her heaving chest. I need that necklace, I said quietly. It belongs to the estate, to the family trust. Her hand clutched at it protectively. No, she gave it to me. She loved me best. She loved you, I agreed, surprising myself with the truth of it. But she saw you clearly. That's why she protected the jewelry, why she changed her will. She hoped you'd change, but she knew you might not. Jake stepped closer, his stance shifting subtly to block potential exits. Madison, I need you to come with me. We can do this quietly, or what? Madison laughed bitterly. You'll arrest me at my own birthday party in front of everyone. She gestured wildly at the watching faces. Is that what you all want? To see me humiliated? To see me destroyed? No one wants that. Tyler spoke up, his voice gentle but firm. But actions have consequences, even for you. Especially for you, I thought, but didn't say. Because Madison had spent 29 years believing consequences were for other people, that rules bent around her, like light around a black hole. Today, gravity was finally catching up. The restaurant manager reappeared, hovering uncertainly. The scene at our table had transformed his elegant venue into something from a reality show. Broken glass glittered on the tablecloth. Spilled champagne dripped onto the floor. And at the center of it all sat Madison, the birthday girl, whose celebration had become a funeral for the life she'd built on lies. Would you like me to? The manager gestured helplessly. Just the check, I said firmly. We'll be leaving soon. But even that simple request would lead to another revelation. Another brick in the wall of Madison's deceptions. Because when the manager returned, his face wore an expression of profound embarrassment. I'm terribly sorry, he said, but the credit card on file for this reservation has been declined. Do you have another form of payment? Madison's face went white beneath the streaked makeup, and in that moment, I knew Jake wasn't the only one who'd been watching her financial house of cards. The collapse had already begun, and today's brunch was just the visible crater of a much deeper implosion. The manager's words about the declined credit card seemed to break something in our mother. Grace stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor, and for the first time in my memory, she looked directly at Madison, without the soft filter of maternal devotion. I knew, Grace said, her voice barely above a whisper but carrying the weight of years. God help me, I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't. I didn't want to see it. Madison's tear-streaked face turned toward our mother with desperate hope. Mom, you understand. You know I would never. Stop. Grace held up a trembling hand. Just stop lying. For once in your life, Madison, stop lying. She sank back into her chair, suddenly looking every one of her 63 years. Sean, there's something I need to tell you, something I should have said years ago. The entire table leaned in, even Jake temporarily setting aside his professional duties to listen. Grace twisted her napkin between her fingers, shredding the expensive linen. 20 years ago, I made a terrible mistake. Your father was traveling constantly for work and I was lonely. There was someone else. Brief, meaningless. But Madison found out. Grace's eyes met mine, swimming with tears and shame. She was only 9, but she held it over me like a sword. Every time I tried to discipline her, every time I said no, she'd threaten to tell your father, to tell you. The revelation settled over me like a cold blanket. So many things suddenly made sense. The inexplicable favoritism, the way Mom always caved to Madison's demands, the guilty looks when Madison got away with another cruelty. By the time she was a teenager, Grace continued, the threats became more sophisticated. She had photos, somehow letters. I don't even know how she got them. I was terrified of losing my family, so I gave her whatever she wanted, including supporting her lies about the condo. That's not all, Aunt Grace. Cousin Emma spoke up from her seat near the window. She'd been so quiet, I'd almost forgotten she was there, but now her face showed a resolve I'd never seen before. Madison's been blackmailing me too. Emma stood her hand steady, despite the tremor in her voice. 5 years ago, I was arrested for shoplifting. It was a stupid mistake during a bad time in my life. I did community service, paid my fines, moved on. But Madison found out. She's been taking $2,000 a month from me to keep quiet about it at work. She said she'd make sure everyone knew their senior marketing director was a thief. Emma, Aunt Patricia gasped, reaching for her daughter. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was ashamed, Emma replied, and Madison was so good at making me feel like I deserved it. Like I should be grateful she was only taking money instead of destroying my career completely. The dominoes continued to fall. Aunt Patricia herself stood next her usual perfectly composed demeanor, cracking. She stole my identity, Patricia announced to the stunned gathering. Opened credit cards in my name. I discovered it 6 months ago when I tried to refinance my house. My credit was destroyed. $40,000 in debt I didn't create. I hired a lawyer, Patricia continued, her voice gaining strength. We traced it all back to Madison, but she convinced me not to press charges. Said it would destroy the family, that Grace couldn't handle the scandal. Made me feel selfish for even considering it. Around the table, other voices began to rise. Cousin Michael revealed Madison had sold him a car that turned out to be stolen, leaving him to deal with the police. Our father's former business partner, Harold, admitted Madison had convinced him to invest in a fake startup, taking his retirement savings. Even the restaurant owner approached our table again, this time with his own story. Miss Madison organized a charity event here last year, he said carefully. Raised $30,000 for children's cancer research. Only the charity never received the money. When they contacted me, she said it was a banking error, promised to fix it. That was 8 months ago. Jake had his phone out, typing rapidly. Ma'am. He addressed Madison formally, now all traces of boyfriend replaced by federal agent. The list of financial crimes here is extensive. Each person's testimony adds charges. We're talking about decades in federal prison. Madison sat silent through it, all her party dress wilted, her careful facade shattered like the champagne flute at her feet. But when she finally spoke, it wasn't with remorse or apology. Instead, her voice carried a venom that made several people step back. You all want to paint me as the villain? Fine. But where were any of you when I needed help? When I was drowning in expectations? Perfect. Madison, successful. Madison, the one who had to achieve everything, because Sean was the sensitive artist who got to fail. She laughed bitterly. You think I wanted to be this way? You think I enjoyed it, every single day having to be smarter, better, more successful, having to carry this whole pathetic family's reputation because none of you could manage it yourselves. That doesn't excuse, I began, but Madison cut me off. Doesn't it? You got to be the struggling artist, the dreamer. I got to be the ATM. Everyone came to me with their problems, their needs, their failures. And yes, I took advantage, because if I was going to carry this family, I was going to get something out of it. Uncle Robert cleared his throat. Madison, you embezzled from the company. You nearly sent your sister to prison for your crimes. That's not about family pressure. That's about choices. Choices. Madison's voice rose again. What choices did I have? From the time I was 5 years old, grandmother compared us. Sweet, creative Sean. Ambitious, difficult Madison. She set us against each other from the beginning. No, I said firmly. Dorothy saw who you were becoming and tried to guide you differently. Every story time, every lesson about kindness and honesty, she was trying to help you. You chose to see it as criticism. You chose to become cruel. Madison's face contorted. Cruel, I survived in a family that valued weakness over strength, sentiment over success. I survived and thrived until you decided to destroy it all. She gestured wildly at the stunned faces around the table. And look how quickly they all turned on me. Family loyalty means nothing when there's blood in the water. You're right about one thing, Grace said quietly. I failed you. I failed both of you. I let my guilt and fear turn me into an enabler. I let you become someone who could do these terrible things because stopping you was harder than giving in. She stood again this time with more certainty. But that ends today. Agent Morrison, I'll provide whatever testimony you need. Financial records, documents, anything. It's time Madison faced consequences for her actions. Mom. Madison's voice broke on the word. You're choosing her over me after everything? I'm choosing truth, Grace replied. Something I should have done 20 years ago. The restaurant had gone completely silent around us. Other diners watched with unabashed fascination as our family drama played out like dinner theater. Staff members clustered near the kitchen doors, unsure whether to intervene or simply witness. Jake stepped forward, his expression professionally neutral but tinged with something that might have been regret. Madison Hartley, I'm placing you under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, charity fraud, and embezzlement. You have the right to remain silent. As he continued the Miranda warning, Madison's eyes found mine. For just a moment, the masks fell away completely. I saw the frightened child. She'd been the one who'd learned too early that manipulation got results. The one who'd chosen power over love, control over connection. The one who'd built such elaborate walls that she'd trapped herself inside them. The jewelry? She said, suddenly interrupting Jake's recitation of rights. Dorothy's jewelry in the condo. I sold most of it, but there are still pieces hidden. Behind the kitchen backsplash, there's a panel, maybe 50,000 worth. She laughed brokenly. Consider it my birthday gift to you, Sean. The only honest thing I've given anyone in years. Jake finished the Miranda warning and gently guided Madison to her feet. The emerald necklace caught the light one last time as she moved, and she reached up to unclasp it with shaking fingers. This should go to you, she said, holding it out to me. Dorothy wanted you to have it. I heard her tell Harrison the day before she changed the will. I wanted one beautiful thing that was supposed to be mine. I took the necklace, its weight surprising in my palm. 3 generations of family history, stolen and recovered, glittering green like hope and greed, intertwined. Around us, the birthday celebration lay in ruins. Overturned glasses, scattered documents, and broken relationships littered the table like casualties of a war that had been raging silently for decades. As Jake led Madison toward the door, she turned back one last time. Happy birthday to me, she said with bitter irony. 29 years old and finally paying the check. The glass doors closed behind them, leaving the rest of us in a silence so complete it felt like the world had stopped spinning. Then Emma began to cry, and Patricia pulled her close, and suddenly everyone was talking at once. Confessions, revelations, and long-buried truths spilled out like champagne from a shattered bottle. But I sat still, holding Dorothy's emeralds, thinking about the price of family secrets and the cost of looking away. The birthday brunch had become something else entirely, a funeral for the lies we'd all agreed to live with, and maybe a birth of something more honest. The parking lot of the Botanical Garden Bistro had transformed into an impromptu crime scene. Police cars with flashing lights blocked the exits while curious onlookers gathered behind yellow tape that seemed to materialize from nowhere. Madison sat in the back of Jake's unmarked federal vehicle, her designer dress incongruous against the metal partition and vinyl seats. But she wasn't going quietly. Through the restaurant's glass walls, we could see her on her phone frantically making calls despite her cuffed wrists. Jake stood outside the car, allowing her this moment, though his expression suggested he was recording every word. "She's calling her lawyer," Uncle Robert observed, rejoining us at the table where we'd remained too shell-shocked to move. "Martin Fitzgerald, he's good, but not good enough for this." As if in response to his assessment, Madison's voice rose loud enough to carry even through glass and distance. We watched her throw the phone down, then immediately pick it back up for another call. This pattern repeated 3 times before Jake finally intervened, taking the phone from her hands. Madison erupted from the car like a fury from Greek mythology, her cuffed hands not preventing her from lunging at Jake. 2 uniformed officers quickly restrained her, but not before her voice carried across the parking lot and through the restaurant's open service door. "They dropped me. My own lawyer dropped me. My accountant won't return my calls. This is your fault. Sean, you poisoned them all against me." Jake guided her firmly back toward the car, but Madison wasn't finished. Her voice rose to a shriek that made diners at nearby tables abandon their meals entirely. "You want to know the truth? Fine, let's talk about truth." She twisted in the officer's grip, her wild eyes finding mine through the window. "Yes, I spread rumors about your miscarriage being fake. You want to know why? Because I couldn't stand watching everyone coddle you poor, fragile Sean who lost a baby. You got all the sympathy, all the attention while I was closing $1 million deals, and no one cared." The confession hit me like a physical blow. Tyler's hand found mine, squeezing hard enough to hurt. That miscarriage had nearly destroyed me, and the whispered doubts about its reality had made the grief unbearable. To know Madison had orchestrated that additional cruelty. "That's not all," Madison continued, seemingly energized by the horror on the faces watching her. "Remember when you didn't get the Parsons Design Fellowship, the one that would have launched your career, I called them. Told them you were mentally unstable, that you'd plagiarized your portfolio. They believed every word because I was so convincing, so concerned about my poor troubled sister." Aunt Patricia gasped. "Madison, that fellowship was worth $200,000. It would have changed Sean's entire life." "Exactly," Madison laughed maniacally. "Just like the Whitmore Academy Scholarship I sabotaged when she was 18. Did you know she was their first choice? Full ride to the best design school in the country? But I sent them photos of her at parties drinking underage. Wrote an anonymous letter about her drug use that never existed. They withdrew the offer the next day." Each revelation was another knife wound. The Whitmore scholarship had been my dream, and when it fell through, I'd assumed I simply wasn't good enough. I'd settled for state school for student loans that took a decade to repay, for always wondering what I'd done wrong. "You sociopath," Emma breathed, voicing what everyone was thinking. Madison's laughter turned darker. "Sociopath, maybe, but I'm not the only one with secrets. Should I tell them about Dad's offshore accounts, Mom? The ones he used to hide money from the IRS, or about Uncle Robert's drinking problem that almost cost him his medical license?" "Enough." Grace stood, her voice carrying an authority I'd never heard before. "You don't get to deflect anymore, Madison. You don't get to hurt other people to minimize your own crimes." But Madison was beyond reason, beyond strategy. The careful control she'd maintained for 29 years had shattered completely. "Hurt people, I made you all better, I pushed you to achieve more. Without me as the villain, you'd all be nothing." Jake signaled to the officers, clearly deciding this public meltdown had gone on long enough. As they guided Madison back to the car, she made one last desperate play. "Tyler," she called out to my husband, "tell her Tell her what really happened at your wedding. Tell her how you kissed me back. Tyler stood slowly, his face carved from stone. You're right, Madison. I should tell her. He turned to me, his eyes steady and honest. When you cornered me at our wedding, when you pressed yourself against me, I pushed you away. But for just a second, just one moment, I was tempted. Not because I wanted you, but because I wanted to hurt you the way you'd hurt Sean. I wanted to make you feel rejected, humiliated, small. He faced Madison again, but I didn't. Because I'm not you. I don't destroy people for sport. And that momentary temptation, it taught me exactly how toxic you are, how you bring out the worst in everyone around you. Madison's face crumbled at this final rejection. The officers loaded her into the car as she dissolved into tears that seemed more rage than remorse. Through the window, we could see her pounding her cuffed hands against the partition, her perfectly styled hair now wild around her face. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. The name on the screen made my blood run cold. Our home security company. Mrs. Chen. The operator's voice was professionally calm. We've had an incident at your residence. Someone attempted to break in through the back door approximately 45 minutes ago. Police responded and have one suspect in custody. They're requesting you come to the property to assess any damage. Tyler and I exchanged glances. Madison's final desperate act even as her world collapsed. She'd hired someone to rob us while we were at her party, probably hoping to retrieve any evidence we might have against her. Or maybe just to hurt us one more time. We should go, Tyler said, but I shook my head. In a minute, this isn't over. Because Jake was walking back toward the restaurant, his expression grim but satisfied. He entered through the main doors and approached our table with the measured pace of someone delivering a verdict. The individual who attempted to break into your home has agreed to cooperate fully, he informed us. Madison hired him this morning, paid him $5,000 in cash to steal specific documents from your home office. He's provided text messages, recorded phone calls, even a written list of what he was supposed to take. Let me guess, I said wearily. Everything related to her crimes. Jake nodded. Plus personal items, your grandmother's photo albums, your design awards, even your wedding album. It seems she wanted to erase you as much as protect herself. Through the window, I could see the federal vehicle pulling away, taking Madison to a processing center where her designer dress would be exchanged for federal detention center standard issue. The birthday girl who'd started the day expecting adoration was ending it in custody, her carefully constructed life revealed as a house of cards in a hurricane. There's more, Jake continued. My colleagues have been executing search warrants at her condo and office. We found evidence of additional schemes, investment fraud, insurance fraud, even a plan to have you declared mentally incompetent to challenge Dorothy's will. He paused, seeming to weigh his words. Your sister wasn't just a criminal. She was building toward something bigger, something that would have destroyed your entire family. The weight of what we'd narrowly escaped settled over the table like fog. If I hadn't found Dorothy's hidden letter, if Mr. Harrison hadn't preserved the real will, if Uncle Robert hadn't investigated the embezzlement, Madison would have succeeded. I would be in prison, our mother would still be trapped, and Madison would be presiding over the ruins of our family like a queen of ashes. What happens now? Grace asked, her voice small and tired. Jake pulled out a business card, sliding it across the table. Now we build the case. Every person here who's been victimized needs to file a report. The U.S. attorney is very interested in this case, especially the charity fraud. Madison's looking at 20 to 30 years minimum. 20 to 30 years. Madison would be nearly 60 when she got out. Her beauty faded, her connections severed, her carefully built empire reduced to a prison identification number. The birthday girl had asked for investment pieces. She'd gotten a lifetime investment in federal consequences. As we gathered ourselves to leave to face police at our violated home and begin the long process of untangling Madison's web of crimes, I looked around the table at my family. Broken, betrayed, but finally free. The secrets were out, The blackmail ended, the lies exposed. Madison had been right about one thing. She had made us stronger, just not in the way she'd intended. Her cruelty had forced us to find courage. Her lies had taught us to value truth. Her darkness had shown us the importance of light. "Thank you," I said to Jake before we left, "for doing your job, but also for caring enough to do it well." He nodded, professional mask slipping just enough to show the human underneath. "She talked about you constantly, always comparing, always competing. I think part of her really did love you in the only way she knew how." "That's the tragedy," I replied. "She turned love into a weapon and then wondered why she was always bleeding." Outside, the January sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that Madison would have called perfect for her birthday photos. But there would be no photos today, no carefully curated social media posts, no image management. Just truth, finally and terrifyingly free. The living room of our Marina District home felt smaller with so many people crammed inside. After dealing with the police and securing our violated space, we'd invited the core family members back to process everything that had happened. The attempted break-in had failed, leaving only a damaged door and muddy footprints on our hardwood floors. But the emotional damage from the day's revelations still hung heavy in the air. "I have something," I announced, retrieving an envelope from our home safe. "Grandmother's lawyer gave me this months ago with instructions to open it at Madison's 29th birthday party. I thought it would be a sweet message, maybe about sisterhood or family. I never imagined—" The envelope felt heavier than paper should. Inside was a letter in Dorothy's distinctive handwriting, along with several photographs and documents. My hands trembled as I unfolded the pages. "My dearest family," I read aloud, "if you're reading this, then Madison has likely continued on the path I watched her choose despite my every effort to redirect her. By now you've probably discovered some of her deceptions. I write this letter to reveal the rest and to explain why I made the choices I did." Grace inhaled sharply, pressing a tissue to her eyes. She knew. All along she knew. I continued reading. "Madison first showed her true nature when she was 7 years old. I found her in my bedroom trying on my jewelry. When I gently told her to put it back, she looked me straight in the eye and said, 'When you die, it will all be mine anyway.' The coldness in a child so young chilled me to my core. But it was what happened when she was 12 that truly opened my eyes. My beloved cat Duchess began falling ill. The vet couldn't determine the cause. One day I came home early from a doctor's appointment to find Madison feeding Duchess antifreeze from a small dish. She'd been poisoning her, slowly watching her suffer because I'd refused to let her take Duchess to her mother's house. Aunt Patricia covered her mouth in horror. "She killed Dorothy's cat!" Or, when confronted, I continued reading. Madison showed no remorse. She said Duchess was old anyway, that she was doing me a favor. The vet confirmed the poisoning, and Duchess had to be put down. Madison attended the burial with dry eyes, asking afterward if we could get a younger, prettier cat. The letter went on each paragraph, revealing another piece of Madison's dark puzzle. Dorothy had documented everything: the forged checks Madison wrote at 14, claiming they were for school activities, the neighbor's missing jewelry that turned up in Madison's room, the small fire in the garage that Madison set to destroy evidence of her theft from the family safe. "I hired a private investigator when Madison was 16, the letter continued. "What he found terrified me. She'd created false identities online, cyberbullying classmates who outshone her. One girl attempted suicide because of Madison's harassment campaign. When I confronted Madison with the evidence, she smiled and said she should have stayed out of my way." Tyler's arm tightened around me as I read. Each word was another crack in the image of Madison as simply ambitious or difficult. This was something far darker. The jewelry collection from Prague. Dorothy's letter explained represents not just wealth but survival. My grandmother sold everything else to buy safe passage for our family and others fleeing the Nazis. Each piece represents lives, saved families preserved. I showed Madison the collection once hoping the story would teach her about sacrifice and love. Instead, I saw greed light her eyes like fire. I sealed the hiding place that very night. The letter then revealed something that made us all gasp. Madison didn't just steal from the collection after I died. She began taking pieces while I was sick during my final months. The ruby ring that supposedly went missing at the hospital. She took it from my bedside while I slept. The sapphire brooch that vanished during my move to hospice in her purse as she pretended to pack my things lovingly. "My God," Uncle Robert muttered, "stealing from her dying grandmother." But the most damning revelation was yet to come. Enclosed with this letter is evidence I've compiled over the years. Madison created fraudulent charities in high school collecting money for causes that didn't exist. She's blackmailed teachers, fellow students, even our postal worker. The FBI has been notified and will act when the time is right. I looked up at the stunned faces around me. Jake wasn't just randomly dating Madison. Dorothy set this in motion years ago. The photographs Dorothy included were devastating. Security footage of Madison stealing from the church collection plate, screenshots of threatening emails she'd sent under false names, bank records showing patterns of theft going back 15 years. Dorothy had been building a case against her own granddaughter, knowing that someday someone would need this evidence. You might wonder, the letter continued in my shaking voice, why I didn't act sooner. The answer is complex. Part of me hoped Madison would change, that love and patience might redirect her path. Part of me feared what exposure would do to our family. But mostly, I needed to protect Sean and ensure Madison couldn't destroy her future, as she'd already begun trying to do. The condo was never meant for Madison, though I let her believe otherwise. Every time she visited, boasting about her success while making cruel comments about Sean, I documented it. Every lie she told, I verified. Every scheme she hatched, I uncovered. This letter and its evidence are my final gift to the family, the truth that will set you free from Madison's web of manipulation. The final paragraph was addressed directly to me. "Sean, my darling girl, you've wondered why Madison hated you so deeply. The answer is simple. You possess what she never could. Genuine kindness, true talent, the ability to love without conditions. She saw in you everything she lacked, and rather than aspiring to grow, she chose to tear you down. Don't let her darkness dim your light. The pearls I gave you carry the love of generations of strong women. Wear them knowing you've already won simply by being authentically yourself." The letter was signed and dated just 1 week before Dorothy entered hospice care. A postscript at the bottom read, "To the judge, who will eventually see this, I am of sound mind and body as I write this. My granddaughter Madison is a danger to everyone around her. Please ensure she faces justice for all those she's harmed. Consider this my testimony from beyond the grave." Silence settled over the room like dust after an explosion. The grandmother we'd all thought of as sweet, but perhaps naive, had been playing a long game none of us had suspected. She'd been detective judge and jury gathering evidence while showing Madison the same loving face she showed us all. "There's one more thing," I said, noticing a sealed envelope at the bottom of the stack. It was addressed to Madison in Dorothy's handwriting. "Should we?" "Open it," Grace said firmly. "No more secrets." Inside was a single paragraph. "Madison, if you're reading this, then you've finally faced consequences for your actions. I loved you every day of your life, even as I watched darkness take root in your heart. I leave you with this. It's never too late to choose differently. Even the longest night eventually gives way to dawn. Your grandmother who never stopped hoping for your redemption." Even facing the truth of Madison's crimes, Dorothy had left room for hope. It was perhaps the most heartbreaking part of all this evidence of unconditional love meeting immovable darkness. "She protected us all," Emma said softly. "Even from beyond death, she protected us." I folded the letters carefully, knowing they would become evidence in federal court. Dorothy's final testimony would ensure Madison faced justice for crimes spanning decades. But more than that, she'd given us the truth. No more secrets, no more blackmail, no more looking over our shoulders. To Dorothy, Uncle Robert raised the glass of water he'd been clutching. Who saw everything and loved us anyway? We raised our glasses in a toast to the grandmother who'd been far cleverer than any of us knew. Outside, night was falling over San Francisco, but inside our home, illuminated by truth and protected by Dorothy's foresight, it felt like dawn. The next morning brought an unexpected gathering at our house. What started as Tyler making coffee for a few family members turned into something resembling a support group for Madison's victims. Word had spread through social networks and family connections, and by 10 o'clock, our living room overflowed with people carrying folders, laptops, and years of suppressed anger. Sarah Whitman arrived first, her silver hair elegant against a black suit that screamed professional success. I recognized her name from Madison's boastful stories about her incompetent former business partner. The truth, as Sarah revealed, was far different. "We started the consulting firm together 5 years ago," Sarah explained to the assembled group. "I brought 20 years of experience and a roster of blue-chip clients. Madison brought charm and what I thought was innovative thinking. Within 6 months, she'd stolen my client list, sabotaged our contracts, and started her own firm using my business plan down to the last detail." Sarah opened her laptop, projecting documents onto our living room wall. But that wasn't enough for her. She seduced my husband, filmed their encounters, then threatened to send the videos to our children unless I signed over my remaining stake in the company and agreed to a non-compete clause. My marriage ended, my career was derailed, and Madison walked away with everything. "Why didn't you go to the police?" Grace asked, her voice soft with shared pain. Sarah's laugh was bitter. With what proof? She was too careful. The videos were on her phone, the threats were verbal, and she'd convinced everyone that I was a bitter ex-partner trying to destroy her success. I've spent 5 years rebuilding my life while watching her thrive on the foundation of my work. Before anyone could respond, our doorbell rang again. Tyler answered it to find 3 women in restaurant uniforms. I recognized them from the Botanical Garden bistro servers who'd witnessed yesterday's dramatic birthday brunch. "We saw what happened yesterday," the eldest, whose name tag read Carmen, said. "We've been waiting for someone to finally stand up to Miss Madison. She's terrorized service workers all over the city." They shared their stories in rapid succession. Madison's habit of dining lavishly, then claiming food poisoning to avoid paying. Her false reviews that had cost several servers their jobs. The elaborate complaint schemes that resulted in free meals and gift cards worth thousands. "But here's what you probably don't know," Carmen continued. "That charity event she hosted at our restaurant. We suspected something was off, so we kept copies of everything. Receipts, contracts, even security footage of her pocketing cash donations." She handed me a flash drive. "We were too scared to come forward alone, but now—" The doorbell rang again. This time it was 2 men in suits who introduced themselves as former employees of Madison's consulting firm. Behind them, a woman clutched a folder thick with medical bills. Then came a young couple whose wedding planning business Madison had destroyed with false reviews. A contractor she'd refused to pay, then threatened with deportation. A charity director who discovered Madison using their organization's name for her own fundraising. Within an hour, 23 people crowded into our home, each carrying evidence of Madison's crimes. The dining table became a makeshift evidence station as documents were sorted, stories corroborated, and patterns identified. She had to type, observed Marcus Chen, the private investigator I'd hired months ago. He'd arrived with charts mapping Madison's victim network. Small business owners without resources to fight back. Service workers who couldn't afford lawyers. People with secrets she could exploit. Always those she perceived as beneath her. Caroline Foster, Madison's own assistant, proved to be the most valuable ally. She sat in the corner typing furiously on her laptop, occasionally projecting another damning document on the wall. I started recording everything 2 years ago, Caroline explained. Every fraudulent expense report, every forged signature, every threatening phone call. I have audio of her planning the charity scams video, of her stealing from the office emails where she discusses destroying competitors. Why stay so long? Tyler asked gently. Caroline's eyes hardened. Because she threatened to have me deported. My visa was tied to the job. But I'm a permanent resident now as of last month. I gave my notice last week, and she laughed, said I'd never work again. When I saw the FBI arrest her yesterday, I knew it was time. She pulled up a spreadsheet that made even hardened Uncle Robert whistle. This is every illegal transaction I witnessed, totaling over $3 million in fraud, theft, and embezzlement. And this, she clicked to another screen, is the recording of her admitting she framed Sean for the company embezzlement. Madison's voice filled the room, casual and cruel. Of course Sean will take the fall. She's too stupid to even realize what's happening. By the time she figures it out, she'll be in federal prison, and I'll be running the family company. The room erupted in angry voices, but Caroline held up her hand. There's more. She kept trophies. Another click revealed photographs Madison had taken of herself wearing Dorothy's stolen jewelry, posing with items she'd stolen from victims, even selfies at the scenes of her various schemes. Classic narcissistic behavior, said Dr. Patricia Hernandez, a psychiatrist who'd tried to treat Madison years ago. I shouldn't be here, patient confidentiality and all, but when someone uses therapy sessions to plan crimes and laugh about the victim's professional ethics become complicated. I've consulted with my board. Given the scope of criminal activity, I'm cleared to testify about her stated intentions to harm others. The stories continued for hours. A landlord she'd driven to bankruptcy with false lawsuits, a professor whose career she destroyed with accusations of harassment after he gave her a B+, a high school classmate who needed reconstructive surgery after Madison pushed her downstairs for winning a debate competition. Each revelation added another layer to the portrait of someone who'd weaponized every advantage, every relationship, every moment of trust. The girl who'd poisoned Dorothy's cat had grown into a woman who poisoned lives with methodical precision. We need to organize, announced a woman named Rebecca Martinez, an attorney who'd been disbarred after Madison fabricated evidence of ethical violations. Individual complaints won't be enough. We need a coordinated approach, shared resources, mutual support. I'll create a secure database, Caroline offered. Everyone can upload their evidence. We'll cross-reference everything, build an airtight case that no judge could ignore. I'll coordinate with the FBI, said another victim, James Park, a former federal prosecutor Madison had blackmailed into early retirement. I still have contacts. They'll want everything we've gathered. As the impromptu summit continued, I noticed my mother sitting apart, tears streaming down her face. Each story seemed to age her further, the weight of her enabling crushing her beneath accumulated guilt. This is my fault, Grace whispered when I sat beside her. I knew she was troubled. I saw the warning signs. But I was too weak, too afraid, too willing to believe her lies because the truth was unbearable. You were a victim too, Sarah Whitman said, overhearing. Parental love is supposed to be unconditional. She exploited that, turned your greatest strength into a weapon against you. Don't carry guilt for loving your daughter. The guilt belongs to Madison alone. As afternoon turned to evening, the group had transformed from scattered victims into an organized force for justice. Contact information was exchanged, support groups planned, legal strategies discussed. The assistant Madison had treated as disposable became the architect of her downfall. The workers she deemed beneath notice held the evidence that would seal her fate. "She always said I didn't matter," Carmen observed, looking at the flash drive of security footage. "Funny how the people who don't matter often see everything that matters." Before everyone dispersed, we stood in a circle, an unlikely alliance forged by shared trauma but strengthened by mutual purpose. Madison had created her own downfall by leaving a trail of wounded people in her wake. Now, those people had found each other, and their collective voice would be impossible to silence. "To justice," Rebecca raised a glass of water, and to Dorothy, who believed we'd find the courage to seek it. The federal detention center's visiting room smelled of industrial disinfectant and desperation. 3 days had passed since Madison's arrest, and through her lawyer she'd requested to see family. Grace had refused, still too shattered by the revelations. But I went accompanied by Tyler and Uncle Robert, drawn by a mixture of curiosity and the need for closure. Madison looked nothing like the polished woman who'd presided over her birthday brunch. Her designer dress had been replaced by orange detention center standard issue. Her elaborate hairstyle had wilted into limp strands. Without makeup, her face appeared both younger and harder, like a mask had finally been removed to reveal the person underneath. "Come to gloat?" she asked as we sat across from her at the scarred metal table. Her hands, usually adorned with expensive rings, were bare except for the marks where jewelry had been. "We came because you asked," I replied simply. Madison laughed a sound like breaking glass. "My lawyer dropped me, said my case was unwinnable after the FBI found Caroline's recordings. My accountant says all my assets are frozen. Even my car got repossessed from the detention center parking lot. Apparently, I'd been making payments with embezzled funds." She leaned forward, eyes wild. "Do you know what the other inmates call me, princess? They found out about the charity fraud, about stealing from kids' cancer funds. You have no idea what that means in here." "You did those things," Uncle Robert said steadily. "You chose to steal from the vulnerable." "I was building an empire." Madison slammed her hands on the table, causing the guard to step forward before settling back. "Every successful person cuts corners. Every fortune is built on someone else's loss. I just got caught." "No," I said firmly. "You got caught because you couldn't stop. It wasn't enough to succeed. You had to destroy everyone around you. You had to hurt people who loved you." Madison's composure, what little remained, cracked like ice in spring. "Love, you want to talk about love. Dorothy loved you best from the day you were born. Mom loved you because you were easier. Everyone loved sweet, artistic Sean while I had to earn every scrap of affection with achievement." "That's not true." I started, but she cut me off. "Isn't it? Do you know what Dorothy said to me when I was 8? I'd won the school spelling bee beaten kids 3 years older. I ran to show her my trophy, and she said, 'That's nice, dear, but Sean painted the most beautiful picture today. Always you. Every accomplishment I achieved was diminished by comparison to your sensitivity, your creativity, your pure little heart.'" The pain in her voice was real, but it didn't excuse the choices she'd made. "So you decided to destroy me." "I decided to win," Madison corrected. "But every victory turned to ash. The more I achieved, the more I needed. The darker the methods, the hollower the success. Do you know what it's like to have everything and feel nothing? To wake up in a waterfront condo bought with stolen money and feel like you're drowning?" "Then why didn't you stop?" Tyler asked quietly. Madison's laugh turned hysterical. "Stop! How do you stop when it's all you know, when manipulation is your native language and cruelty is your currency? I tried once, you know. When I was 22, I went to therapy, tried to be normal. But normal people are sheep. They accept less dreams small, let others surpass them. I couldn't be that. I'd rather be a wolf in a cage than a sheep in a field." A buzzer sounded harsh in the sterile room. Visiting time was ending, but Madison grabbed my hand across the table. The guard moved forward, but she ignored him. Want to know the worst part? Her grip was desperate, her eyes searching mine for something I couldn't give. I'm pregnant. 6 weeks. Jake's baby. The prison doctor confirmed it yesterday. The revelation hung between us like a grenade with the pin pulled. Madison pregnant in federal detention facing decades in prison. A child who would be born into the consequences of their mother's crimes. Jake doesn't know yet. She continued, releasing my hand as the guard insisted. Ironic, isn't it? I finally have something real, something that's mine, and it's happening here, in this place, because of choices I can't undo. As we were escorted out, Madison called after us. Tell Mom I'm sorry, not for what I did, but for what I couldn't be. Tell her I tried to love her back, but all I knew how to do was use her love against her. The metal doors clanged shut behind us, but Madison's words followed us to the parking lot. Tyler drove while Uncle Robert and I sat in stunned silence, processing this final twist in Madison's story. She'll try to use the pregnancy for leniency, Robert finally said. It's her last card to play. But I was thinking about the child innocent of their mother's crimes, but destined to carry their weight. The cycle Madison had perpetuated, the pain passed from generation to generation, now had the potential to continue or finally break. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, my blood chilled. It was from Madison's phone somehow. You think you've won, but I'm not finished. Even from here I can reach you. The people I know, the favors I'm owed, the secrets I still hold. This isn't over. Family loyalty works both ways, sister. Remember that. When you're sleeping in your safe little house wearing grandmother's pearls, living the life that should have been mine. I showed the text to Tyler and Robert. Another crime to add to the list, threatening a witness from federal detention. Madison couldn't help herself. Even facing the consequences of a lifetime of manipulation, she was still scheming. Still threatening, still convinced she could control the narrative. But as we drove home through San Francisco's foggy streets, I realized something had fundamentally changed. Madison's breakdown wasn't just the collapse of her schemes or the end of her freedom. It was the shattering of the myth she'd built around herself. The successful consultant, the devoted daughter, the charitable socialite, all revealed as constructions as fragile as spun sugar in rain. The woman in orange, stripped of her props and pretense, was finally visible. Not a master manipulator, but a damaged person who'd chosen damage over healing power, over connection, fear over love. Her empire hadn't been built on strength, but on the weakness of being unable to face her own humanity. What do we do about the pregnancy? Tyler asked as we pulled into our driveway. We tell Jake, I decided. He deserves to know, and maybe that child is Madison's chance at redemption. Not for her, but through her. A life that starts with truth instead of lies. The house felt like a sanctuary after the oppressive atmosphere of the detention center. I touched Dorothy's pearls at my throat, thinking of generations of women who'd faced impossible choices and chosen love over fear. Madison had broken that chain, but perhaps her child could forge it anew. As night fell over the city, I wondered if Madison was lying in her cell, feeling the first flutter of life within her, while surrounded by the death of everything she'd built. The birthday girl had gotten her wish in the cruelest way possible. She'd wanted to be special, to stand apart. Now she stood apart indeed, but not as she'd imagined. Not as a success story, but as a cautionary tale. Not as someone to envy, but as someone to pity. The wolf she'd chosen to be had finally been caged, and inside the cage she discovered she was pregnant with a lamb. The irony would have been poetic if it weren't so tragic. Madison, who'd never created anything that wasn't built on someone else's destruction, was now creating life. The question was whether that life would be her salvation or just another victim of her inability to love without conditions. Only time would tell, and Madison finally had plenty of that. 20 to 30 years, the federal prosecutor had estimated. Time enough for a child to grow up hopefully far from their mother's influence. Time enough for Madison to face the person she'd become. Time enough, perhaps, for even the hardest heart to learn how to break properly so something better could grow from the ruins. The Marina District Community Center had never hosted a gathering quite like this one. 3 weeks after Madison's arrest, our fractured family came together in a circle of folding chairs, guided by Dr. Patricia Hernandez, the psychiatrist who'd once tried to help Madison. She'd volunteered to facilitate what she called a healing circle, though most of us just called it desperately necessary. Secrets are like carbon monoxide. Dr. Hernandez began, her voice gentle but firm. Invisible, odorless, but deadly if left unchecked. This family has been breathing poison for so long you've forgotten what clean air tastes like. Grace sat directly across from me, looking like she'd aged a decade in 3 weeks. The designer clothes had been replaced by simple slacks and a sweater. The perfect makeup was gone, revealing a face marked by tears and sleepless nights. When she spoke, her voice barely carried across the circle. "I failed you all," she began, hands twisted in her lap. "Not just as a mother, but as a person. I let my fear of exposure turn me into Madison's enabler. Every time Sean suffered because of Madison's cruelty, I looked away. Every achievement Madison stole, every opportunity she destroyed, I pretended not to see. Mom," I started, but she held up a trembling hand. "Please let me finish. I need to say this." She took a shuddering breath. "The affair 20 years ago wasn't my only secret. Madison knew about the prescription pills I got addicted to after Dad's cancer diagnosis. She knew about the money I borrowed from his treatment fund to feed that addiction. She held every shame, every mistake, every moment of weakness over my head like a sword." Uncle Robert leaned forward. "Grace, we all knew you were struggling back then. We would have helped." "That's what Madison counted on," Grace continued. "My pride, my fear of disappointing you all. She was so young when she learned that shame was currency, that secrets were power. I taught her that. By example, I taught my daughter that love was conditional, that it could be bought with silence and sold for compliance." Tears flowed freely now, not just from Grace, but from several family members. Aunt Patricia reached over to squeeze Grace's hand, her own story of identity theft and credit destruction, a testament to how Madison's patterns had repeated across every relationship. "I need to tell you something else," Grace said, looking directly at me. "The night before Dorothy changed her will, she came to me. She said she was leaving the condo to you, Sean. I begged her not to. I knew Madison would be furious that she'd retaliate. Dorothy looked at me with such disappointment and said, 'You'd sacrifice one daughter's future to appease another's greed. That's why Madison is the way she is.'" The words hung in the air like a verdict, but instead of judgment, something else filled the space. Understanding, perhaps, or the beginning of it. Emma spoke next, her voice stronger than it had been at the birthday brunch. "I've been thinking about patterns," she said. "Madison learned early that everyone had a price, a weakness, a breaking point. But maybe we taught her that by breaking so easily, by paying her emotional blackmail without question, by treating her manipulation as if it were normal sibling rivalry or ambitious personality. The question is," Dr. Hernandez interjected gently, "what do you all want to do with this understanding Madison is facing justice for her crimes, but this family still needs healing? You can't change the past, but you can choose how to move forward." Tyler squeezed my hand as I stood to speak. "I've been angry for so long," I admitted. "Angry at Madison for what she took from me. Angry at Mom for letting it happen. Angry at myself for not fighting back sooner. But sitting in that detention center, seeing her broken and pregnant and still scheming, I realized something. The anger was keeping me chained to her as surely as any blackmail." I pulled out a folder I'd brought with me. These are all the opportunities Madison stole from me. The Whitmore Scholarship, the Parsons Fellowship, the client lists. She destroyed the reputation she tarnished. For years, I defined myself by these losses. Poor Sean, who could have been somebody if not for her evil sister. One by one, I tore the papers in half. But I'm not going to be a victim anymore. Yes, Madison took things from me, but she didn't take my talent, my integrity, my ability to love and trust. Those are mine, and they're worth more than any scholarship or client list. Besides, I added with a small smile, I'm pregnant too. Tyler and I found out yesterday. This child will grow up in a family that's learned the cost of secrets and the value of truth. That's worth more than anything Madison tried to steal. The announcement brought the first genuine joy to the room in weeks. Congratulations mingled with tears as family members absorbed the news. Two cousins, both pregnant, their children destined for very different futures. Speaking of the future, Uncle Robert said, clearing his throat, the family company needs leadership. With Madison exposed and the embezzlement charges filed, we need someone with integrity to help rebuild. Sean, the board voted unanimously. We want you as creative director, not because of what Madison did, but because of who you are. Dorothy always said you had the vision to take the company forward. She was right. I sat down, heavily overwhelmed. The company I'd been excluded from the position Madison had schemed to control now offered freely, not as compensation for past hurts, but as recognition of present worth. There's more, Robert continued. We're establishing the Dorothy Hartley Foundation for Ethics in Business. We'll use the recovered embezzlement funds to support small business owners, especially those who've been victims of corporate fraud. Sarah Whitman has agreed to run it. We're turning Madison's crimes into something positive. The healing circle continued for 2 more hours. Stories were shared, apologies, offered forgiveness, tentatively extended. Not everyone was ready to fully let go of the past, but everyone was willing to try building a different future. As we prepared to leave, Dr. Hernandez offered a final thought. Healing isn't linear. There will be days when the anger returns, when the hurt feels fresh. That's normal. What matters is that you're no longer alone with it. Secrets isolate, but truth connects. You've chosen connection. Outside the community center, the family lingered, reluctant to separate after such intense sharing. Cousins who'd been turned against each other by Madison's manipulations made plans for coffee. Aunts and uncles who'd suffered in silence exchanged phone numbers and promises to check in. What about Madison? Emma asked quietly. Do we visit her? Write to her. She's still family. That's for each person to decide, when I said, I'm not ready yet. Maybe someday, especially after her child is born. But right now, I need distance to heal. Grace nodded slowly. I'll write to her, not to enable or excuse, but to let her know she's not forgotten. Maybe knowing that unconditional love exists, even if she can't access it from prison, will plant a seed. Dorothy never gave up hope for redemption, neither will I. As we drove home, Tyler and I sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined over my still flat stomach where new life grew. The family I'd thought was irreparably broken had shown remarkable resilience. Like bones that grow stronger at the breakpoint, we were knitting back together with new strength. Do you think Madison watched from her cell? Tyler asked. Somehow knew we were gathering without her. Probably, I admitted. She always did have a sixth sense for family events she couldn't control. But that's the point. She can't control this. For the first time in 29 years, Madison doesn't get a vote in how our family moves forward. That night, I placed Dorothy's pearls in my jewelry box and pulled out the emerald necklace Madison had worn to her birthday brunch. It had been returned to me as the rightful heir, but wearing it felt wrong. Instead, I decided to donate it to the new foundation to be auctioned for charity. Let something Madison had stolen serve those she'd hurt. It seemed like poetic justice Dorothy would approve of. My phone buzzed with a text from Grace. Thank you for today, for your courage in facing Madison, for giving us all permission to stop pretending. I love you always have, even when I was too weak to show it. Your child is lucky to have you as a mother." I typed back, "We're all learning. That's what family does." And for the first time in years, I actually believed it. The federal courthouse in downtown San Francisco resembled a fortress of justice, its granite steps worn smooth by decades of people seeking resolution. 3 weeks after our family healing circle, I climbed those steps flanked by Tyler and our lawyer preparing to testify in United States versus Madison Hartley. The courtroom buzzed with energy. Media outlets had picked up the story of the socialite who'd stolen millions while running fake charities, the birthday bust. One newspaper had called it featuring a photo of Madison at last year's gala next to her booking photo. The contrast was striking. Madison sat at the defense table in a conservative navy suit, her pregnancy now showing at 4 months. She'd lost weight everywhere, except her middle, giving her an almost fragile appearance that her new lawyer was clearly trying to emphasize. But when our eyes met across the courtroom, the familiar calculating look remained. Federal prosecutor Jennifer Walsh stood to address the court. "Your Honor, the defendant stands accused of 27 federal charges, including wire fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, money laundering, tax evasion, and RICO violations for operating an ongoing criminal enterprise. The government will show that Madison Hartley systematically defrauded individuals, businesses, and charities of over $3.7 million over a 15-year period." The first witness was Caroline Foster Madison's former assistant. She took the stand with a banker's box of evidence, her testimony methodical and devastating. She played recordings of Madison planning schemes, showed forged documents with practiced signatures, presented spreadsheets tracking stolen funds. "She called it the game," Caroline testified. "She kept score of how much she'd taken from whom. There was a ranking system. Family members were worth more points because, and I quote, 'they should know better than to trust me.'" When Madison's lawyer cross-examined, trying to paint Caroline as a disgruntled employee, she remained unshakable. "I have recordings of Ms. Hartley saying she'd frame me for embezzlement if I ever betrayed her. I'm not disgruntled. I'm free." Sarah Whitman testified next, detailing the destruction of her business and marriage. Then came the charity directors, the business owners, the service workers. Each witness added another stone to the mountain of evidence burying Madison's defense. When I took the stand, prosecutor Walsh walked me through the attempted framing for embezzlement, the sabotaged career opportunities, the years of systematic destruction. I kept my voice steady, focusing on facts rather than emotions. Ms. Chen, Madison's lawyer, began his cross-examination. "Isn't it true you were jealous of your sister's success?" "I was envious sometimes," I admitted. "Who wouldn't want success? But I wanted to earn my own, not steal hers. And as we've established, most of her success was stolen from others anyway." "You sold the condo your grandmother left to Madison, correct?" "I sold the condo grandmother left to me, which Madison had fraudulently claimed through forged documents. The legitimate will has been verified by 3 handwriting experts." He tried several more angles, but each attempt to discredit me only highlighted Madison's crimes. When he suggested I was exaggerating her behavior, I simply directed him to the evidence. The most dramatic moment came when Jake Morrison, the FBI agent who'd posed as Madison's boyfriend, took the stand. His testimony revealed the depth of the federal investigation, including Madison's plans to flee the country using a fake passport she'd obtained. "She had $2 million in cryptocurrency hidden in offshore accounts," he testified. "She was days away from disappearing when your grandmother's letter prompted us to accelerate our timeline. If not for Sean Chen's actions at that birthday brunch, Madison Hartley would be living under an assumed name in a non-extradition country." During a recess, I encountered Madison in the hallway. Her lawyer tried to steer her away, but she shook him off. "Enjoying the show?" she asked, one hand protective over her growing belly. There's no joy in this, I replied honestly, just necessity. Necessity, she repeated with a bitter laugh. You know what's necessary, survival. Everything I did was about surviving in a world that rewards weakness and punishes strength. You really believe that? I said, seeing the truth in her eyes. You really think kindness is weakness? That's the saddest part of all this. You're brilliant, Madison. You could have built something real, something lasting. Instead, you built a house of cards and now you're angry at the wind for knocking it down. Her lawyer pulled her away before she could respond, but I saw something flicker in her expression. Not remorse exactly, but maybe the first crack in her armor of self-justification. The trial continued for 2 more days. Uncle Robert testified about the corporate embezzlement. Dr. Hernandez was allowed to discuss Madison's stated intentions to harm others. Even the man Madison had hired to rob our house testified as part of his plea deal. But the most powerful testimony came from an unexpected source. Grace took the stand on the final day, called as a defense witness, but delivering something else entirely. I enabled my daughter's crimes, she said, looking directly at Madison. Every time I gave in to her blackmail, every time I looked away from her cruelty, I became complicit. I failed her by loving her wrongly, by teaching her that manipulation worked. But I won't fail her again by lying for her now. She turned to the judge. Your Honor, my daughter needs consequences, not because I don't love her, but because I do. She's pregnant now, carrying a child who deserves a mother capable of truth. Maybe accountability can teach what my enabling couldn't. Madison's composure finally cracked. You're supposed to be on my side, she shouted, half rising from her chair. You're my mother. Yes, Grace said quietly, and that's why I'm telling the truth. For once in your life, Madison, face what you've done. Not for me, not for Sean, but for that baby you're carrying. Break the cycle. Please. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours, guilty on all 27 counts. As the verdict was read, Madison sat perfectly still, one hand on her belly, her face a mask that revealed nothing. But I saw her fingers tremble against the fabric of her suit. The sentencing was set for 6 weeks later, allowing time for pre-sentencing reports and victim impact statements. Madison was remanded to custody her pregnancy, not considered sufficient reason for bail given her flight risk. As court officers prepared to lead her away, Madison turned to look at our family seated in the gallery. For just a moment, the masks fell away completely. She wasn't the master manipulator or the victim of persecution. She was a pregnant woman facing decades in prison, the consequences of a lifetime of choices that had led inexorably to this moment. Take care of my baby, she said, though it wasn't clear who she was addressing. Make sure they know their mother loved them, even if I didn't know how to love anyone else. Then she was gone, led through a side door to a van that would return her to federal detention. The courtroom slowly emptied, but our family remained seated, absorbing the weight of justice served. What happens to the baby? Emma asked quietly. Jake's seeking custody, I said. He's devastated by all of this, but he wants to raise the child. Away from all of this with his family in Colorado. Give them a fresh start. It seemed fitting somehow. Madison's child would be raised by one of her victims, but one who'd loved her despite the deception. Perhaps that combination of truth and love would create what Madison never had a chance at: genuine happiness. As we left the courthouse, cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions, but we moved through them in united silence, a family that had faced its darkness and chosen to walk toward whatever light we could find or create. The birthday girl who'd wanted to be special had gotten her wish in the worst possible way. She'd be in law school textbooks now, a cautionary tale about white-collar crime and family fraud. But for us, she was still Madison. Sister, daughter, cautionary tale, and somewhere underneath all the damage, a human being who'd taken a wrong turn so early she'd forgotten any other way existed. The tragedy wasn't just in the crimes or the punishment. It was in the waste. All that intelligence, all that drive, all that potential spent on destruction instead of creation. Madison had proven you could steal almost anything except the one thing she'd wanted most: genuine love and respect. Those, it turned out, you had to earn. And the price was the one currency Madison had never been willing to pay: truth. 6 months after Madison's conviction, the waterfront condo at 92 Marina Boulevard had been transformed. What once served as Madison's stage for deception now housed my interior design studio, its walls displaying fabric samples and sketches instead of stolen luxury. The hidden panel Dorothy had sealed away stood open, converted into a memorial display case for the few pieces of jewelry we'd recovered. From darkness to light, Tyler said, watching me arrange client presentations in what had been Madison's home office. Dorothy would be proud. The morning sun, streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminated more than just the space. It highlighted the profound changes in all our lives. My design business, once sabotaged into near extinction, now thrived with a waiting list of clients. The story of my perseverance in the face of family fraud had ironically become my best marketing tool. Sarah Whitman called. Tyler continued scrolling through his phone. The foundation's first fundraising gala exceeded goals by 300%. They're funding legal aid for 20 small business owners who've been victims of corporate fraud. The Dorothy Hartley Foundation for Ethics in Business had become Sarah's redemption as much as mine. The woman Madison had destroyed professionally now ran a multi-million-dollar charitable organization built from the ashes of Madison's schemes. We'd auctioned Dorothy's emerald necklace for $800,000, with the buyer anonymously donating it back to be displayed at fundraising events. My phone buzzed with a video call from Jake Morrison in Colorado. His face appeared on screen, exhausted but smiling with a bundle in his arms. Someone wanted to say good morning to Aunt Shawn, he said, adjusting the camera to show a tiny face surrounded by pink blankets. Madison's daughter, born 2 months ago in the federal medical facility, had Jake's nose but her mother's distinctive eyes. "Hello, Harper," I cooed at the screen, getting bigger every day. Jake had named her Harper Dorothy Morrison, honoring our grandmother while giving the child her own identity. The adoption had been finalized just weeks after birth, Madison signing away her parental rights with what Jake described as relieved resignation. "How is she?" I asked, meaning Madison. "It's 22 years, Jake said quietly, shifting Harper to his shoulder, with possibility of parole in 15 if she completes therapy programs and maintains good behavior. She's adjusting. Enrolled in college courses, working in the prison library. She sends letters for Harper, but I haven't decided when or if to share them." Those letters arrived at our family's homes, 2 carefully crafted apologies that walked the line between genuine remorse and subtle manipulation. Grace answered everyone determined to maintain connection without enabling. I'd written back once, sending photos of the design studio and telling her about the foundation's work. Her response had been 2 words: "I'm sorry." "Uncle Robert's here," Tyler announced as footsteps echoed from the stairs. Robert entered, carrying banker's boxes, his face lighter than it had been in years. At 71, he'd taken back the CEO role at the family company, guiding it through the scandal of Madison's embezzlement with steady hands. "Final audit results," he announced, setting the boxes on my drafting table. "We've recovered 87% of the stolen funds. The forensic accountants found hidden accounts even the FBI missed. Madison was meticulous in her crimes, but also in her record-keeping." Speaking of the company," he continued, his eyes twinkling, "the board approved the new creative direction you proposed. The Sustainable Design Division launches next quarter with you as lead consultant. Dorothy always said you'd bring the company into the future." The offer was more than a job. It was a full-circle moment. The company Madison had pillaged would be rebuilt with integrity at its core, with the opportunities she'd stolen from me transformed into something larger and more meaningful. My phone rang with another familiar number. Carolyn Foster, now running her own consulting firm specializing in corporate compliance and fraud prevention, had become an unexpected friend. "Did you see the news?" she asked without preamble. "Madison's case is being added to FBI training curricula. She's officially a textbook example of escalating white-collar crime. In a twisted way, she achieved the notoriety she always craved." The irony wasn't lost on any of us. Madison had wanted to be special, to be remembered, to leave a mark. She'd succeeded, just not in the way she'd imagined. Law students would study her crimes. Business ethics courses would use her as a cautionary tale. The girl who'd craved admiration had become infamous. "Also," Caroline added, "I'm pregnant. Due 2 weeks after you. Thought you should know our kids will grow up together, free from the toxic dynamics we survived." After ending the call, I found myself at the window where Madison had once stood, looking out at San Francisco Bay while wearing stolen jewels and planning new schemes. Now I stood there, 5 months pregnant, wearing Dorothy's pearls, planning nursery colors and play dates. "The inspector's here," Tyler called out, "for the final safety check on the nursery." We'd converted Madison's walk-in closet into a small nursery, both practical and symbolic. The space that had held her designer goods obtained through fraud would shelter new life built on truth. As the inspector checked outlets and window locks, I couldn't help but think about the parallel pregnancies that had defined this chapter of our story. "All clear," the inspector announced. "You're ready for baby." That evening, our family gathered for Sunday dinner at Grace's house, a tradition re-established after the trial. The formal dining room Madison had dominated with cutting remarks and strategic manipulation, now filled with genuine laughter and easy conversation. To new beginnings, Uncle Robert raised his glass of sparkling cider, mindful of the pregnant women present. And to Dorothy, who somehow knew we'd find our way here. To accountability, Grace added, her voice steady, and to the courage to face hard truths. To Harper, Emma contributed, and all the children who'll grow up knowing love doesn't require manipulation. As we clinked glasses, I felt movement in my belly, the first flutter strong enough to be unmistakable. Tyler's hand found mine, feeling the promise of the future we were building on the cleared ground of the past. "Madison called today," Grace said quietly during dessert. "From the prison. She started therapy, real therapy this time. The psychologist says she's beginning to understand the difference between achievement and worth, between power and connection. It's early days, but there's hope," I finished. "There's always hope." Because if Madison's story had taught us anything, it was that people could surprise you in both directions. The loving sister could become a criminal mastermind. The enabling mother could find her backbone. The scattered victims could unite for justice. The stolen opportunities could be reclaimed and transformed into something better. My design studio had 3 new interns now, young women from disadvantaged backgrounds who reminded me of myself before Madison's sabotage. I taught them not just about color theory and spatial planning, but about integrity and resilience. How to build something real, something lasting, something that didn't require stepping on others to rise. "Oh," Grace added, pulling out a folder, "the prison allows Madison to take online courses. She's studying social work, focusing on criminal justice reform. She says she wants to help other women avoid her mistakes." The table fell silent processing this. Madison, who'd spent decades perfecting the art of exploitation, now studying how to help others. It seemed either like the ultimate redemption arc or the longest con yet. Time would tell. "At least she's trying," Emma said finally. "That's more than we could have hoped for 6 months ago." As dinner wound down and family members prepared to leave, I found myself back in the studio, looking at the memorial case holding Dorothy's recovered jewelry. Each piece told a story of survival against odds, of choosing hope over fear, of protecting what mattered, even when it cost everything. You saw all of this, I whispered to Dorothy's portrait on the wall. You knew Madison would fall and we'd rise. You knew the family could survive the truth. Thank you for believing in us when we couldn't believe in ourselves. Tyler appeared in the doorway, ready to go home. I am home, I replied, gesturing at the transformed space. We all are, finally. Because home wasn't just a place. It was the peace that came from living authentically, the connections built on truth rather than manipulation, the future we were creating for our children, free from the patterns that had trapped us. Madison had taught us that brilliance without conscience was destruction. Dorothy had taught us that love with wisdom was power. We were choosing Dorothy's path, building something Madison couldn't steal because it wasn't about things or achievements or recognition. It was about becoming the people we were meant to be all along, before fear and secrets and lies got in the way. And in that becoming, we'd found what Madison had spent her life seeking in all the wrong places. We'd found ourselves, and we'd found each other. The birthday girl's wish had come true in reverse. Instead of everyone staying in their lane while she dominated the road, we'd all found our authentic paths. And Madison, ironically, had been the catalyst that set us free. The visiting room at the Federal Correctional Institution felt different this time. 1 year into her sentence, Madison had requested to see me alone, her first such request since the trial. I debated for weeks before agreeing, my pregnancy having given way to a 6-month-old son whose existence seemed to demand closure with the past. Madison entered with measured steps, her designer swagger replaced by something more subdued. Prison had carved away the excess, revealing sharp angles and hollow spaces where entitlement once lived. Her hair, once professionally styled weekly, hung in a simple braid. The orange uniform somehow suited her better than any designer dress ever had, its honesty matching something new in her eyes. You came, she said, sitting across from me at the scarred table. You asked, I replied simply. We sat in silence for a full minute, years of complicated history compressed into the space between us. When Madison finally spoke, her voice carried an unfamiliar quality, genuine uncertainty. I killed a woman's cat last week, she said, then quickly added at my alarmed expression. No, not like that, I held her while the prison vet put her down. Kidney failure. Her owner, Linda, she's doing life for killing her abusive husband. That cat was all she had left from her old life. She paused, studying her hands. I held Linda while she sobbed. Me. The person who poisoned Dorothy's cat out of spite. And all I could think was how I'd stolen even the possibility of that kind of grief from grandmother. The chance to say goodbye to something she loved. Why are you telling me this? I asked, genuinely curious. Because Dr. Reeves, my therapist, says I need to understand the difference between intellectual understanding and emotional comprehension of harm caused. Madison's laugh was bitter. Turns out, knowing you hurt people and feeling it are different things. Who knew? She leaned forward, and I saw something I'd never seen before in my sister's eyes, raw vulnerability. Do you know what my job is here? I teach literacy classes. Me teaching women who never had the chances I threw away how to read. Some of them are here for stealing food to feed their kids. One woman embezzled $30,000 to pay for her daughter's cancer treatment. Her voice cracked. They look at me like I'm some kind of idiot savant. All that education, all that opportunity, and I used it to steal from children's charities. They can't understand it. Neither can I anymore. What changed? I asked. Celeste Washington, Madison said immediately. My cellmate, former prosecutor here for taking bribes. First month I tried to run my usual games on her. Manipulation, sob stories, attempting to establish dominance. She just laughed and said, Girl, that shit don't work in here. You want to survive? Learn to be real. Madison's hands twisted together. She became my mirror. Every scheme I tried, she'd call it out. Every lie, every manipulation, every attempt to be anyone but myself. Do you know how exhausting it is to just be without the masks, without the games? Actually, I said carefully, I don't. I've never had to maintain that level of deception. Right, Madison nodded. Because you're normal. I'm beginning to understand that now. What I thought was weakness in you and everyone was actually just humanity, connection, the ability to exist without consuming others. A guard walked by, reminding us of the time limit. Madison spoke faster urgency creeping into her voice. I dream about Harper, not the baby I gave birth to, but the child she'll become. Jake sends photos, tells me about her first smile, her laugh that sounds like mine. I signed away my rights, but I can't sign away the knowledge that I created someone who will have to live with my legacy. Jake's a good father, I offered. She'll know love. Will she know me? Madison's question hung in the air. Not the crimes, those are public record, but will she know that I loved her enough to let her go, that giving her up was the first selfless thing I'd ever done? I thought about the letters Madison sent, carefully preserved in a box Jake would give Harper when she was older. Letters full of apology and explanation of hope for a future unmarred by the past. That's not for me to answer, I said, but Jake keeps everything you send. He says someday Harper will decide for herself what relationship, if any, she wants with you. Madison nodded, then suddenly asked, How's your son James, right? Jamie, I corrected, surprised she knew even that much. He's good, happy, surrounded by family who've learned the value of honesty. Because of me. It wasn't a question. My destruction taught everyone what to rebuild. Ironic, isn't it? I wanted to be the center of the family, and I am. Just as the cautionary tale instead of the success story. You could still change that narrative, I suggested. 15 years minimum before parole, but that's 15 years to become someone different. Madison's laugh was hollow. Different. I don't even know who I am now. For 29 years, I was Madison, the successful Madison, the schemer. Madison, the one who won at any cost. Now I'm inmate 47829-112, teaching reading to women who've lived harder lives with more grace than I ever showed. She stood abruptly, signaling the end of our visit. Sean, I need to tell you something. The miscarriage you had, the one I spread rumors about being fake, I was pregnant once too, in college. I terminated it because a baby didn't fit my 5-year plan. When you lost yours and everyone rallied around you, all I could think was how I'd thrown away what you desperately wanted. The rumors were my way of punishing you for making me face that choice. The confession landed like a physical blow. Another layer of Madison's complex cruelty rooted in her own pain, but expressed through causing others to suffer. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she continued as the guard approached. Dr. Reeves says that's not mine to request or expect. I'm just trying to practice truth. It's harder than any lie I ever told. As she turned to go, I called out, Madison. She paused, looking back. The literacy program, are you good at it? Teaching? For the first time in our entire lives, I saw my sister genuinely smile. Not the practiced society smile or the predatory grin, but something real and almost surprised. Yeah, she said softly, I actually am. Turns out when you stop trying to destroy people, you can actually help them. Who knew? The guard led her away, back to a world of scheduled counts and limited choices, where Madison, the master manipulator, was learning to be just Madison. As I gathered my things, I noticed she'd left something on the table, a small card handmade with prison-approved materials. Inside, in careful calligraphy, were 2 words, I'm trying. The drive home took me through familiar San Francisco streets, past the restaurant where her birthday brunch had imploded, past the offices where she'd built her empire of lies. But I also drove past the foundation offices where Sarah Whitman was helping fraud victims rebuild their lives, past the family company where ethical business practices were now carved into policy, past the community center where our family still met monthly to practice honest communication. Madison had been the earthquake that revealed our foundations were unstable. but we'd rebuilt stronger with truth as our bedrock. Her crimes had catalyzed our transformation from a family of secret keepers to truth tellers, from enablers to people who understood that real love includes accountability. At home, Tyler was feeding Jamie dinner sweet potato puree, decorating both their faces. My son's laugh filled the kitchen, pure and unguarded, knowing nothing of the aunt whose choices had shaped his world before he was born. "How was it?" Tyler asked, wiping Jamie's face. "Different," I said, kissing them both. "She's actually changing, or at least trying to." "Let's think it's real." I thought about Madison holding another inmate's dying cat, teaching women to read making cards by hand instead of buying influence. About her confusion at discovering that being real was harder than being fake, that truth was a muscle weakened by decades of disuse. "I think," I said carefully, "that for the first time in her life, Madison has nothing to gain from changing except the change itself. No audience to impress, no wealth to accumulate, no family to manipulate. Just the chance to become someone who can look in the mirror without schemes and stratagems." "That's something," Tyler agreed. That night, I added Madison's card to a box of family mementos next to photos of Dorothy and the pearls I now wore only on special occasions. Someday, I'd tell Jamie about his aunt, about the choices that led to consequences, about how even broken people could choose to heal if they were brave enough to face themselves. Madison had 15 more years minimum to practice that bravery. 15 years of literacy classes and therapy sessions of small truths, building toward larger ones of learning that power over others was nothing compared to peace with oneself. She might fail. The patterns of a lifetime were hard to break, especially for someone who'd made manipulation her native language. But she was trying, and that was more than any of us had dared hope for when she'd raised that birthday toast to people staying in their lanes. Now Madison was finally in her own lane, a narrow prison corridor that might lead to redemption. Not the grand gesture redemption of movies, but the slow daily work of becoming human, of learning that winning wasn't everything, that success without integrity was failure, that the love she'd tried to steal had always been available to earn. The birthday girl was spending her 30s behind bars, but maybe she'd emerge in her 40s as something she'd never been before herself, without additives or artifice. And that would be the greatest transformation of all. The dedication ceremony for the Dorothy Hartley Memorial Garden took place on an unseasonably warm January day, exactly 2 years after Madison's catastrophic birthday brunch. The rooftop space at the family company building had been transformed from a neglected concrete expanse into a blooming oasis, complete with fountains, benches, and a bronze plaque bearing Dorothy's favorite quote, "Truth is the soil in which love grows best." "She would have loved this," Grace said, touching the plaque with weathered fingers. The past 2 years had aged her in some ways, but in others, she seemed younger, unburdened by decades of secrets. Her work as a victims' rights advocate had given her purpose beyond penance. The garden bloomed with plants chosen for their meaning, forget-me-nots for remembrance, sage for wisdom, lavender for peace. At the center grew a Prague rattan rose, propagated from a cutting Dorothy had smuggled from her homeland, its pink blooms defiant against winter. Ladies and gentlemen," Uncle Robert addressed the gathered crowd of employees, family, and fraud survivors who'd become extended family. "This garden represents more than memorial. It's a testament to resilience, to the beauty that can grow from the darkest soil." As he spoke, I spotted Jake Morrison entering with Harper, now an energetic toddler with Madison's striking eyes but a personality all her own. She toddled toward the fountain, fascinated by the water, while Jake kept protective watch. Auntie Sean." Harper squealed, spotting me. I scooped her up, marveling at how different she was from her mother at that age. Where Madison had been calculating even as a toddler, Harper radiated joy and curiosity without agenda. Ish, she's talking so much now, Jake said, joining us. He looked tired but content, single parenthood suiting him despite its challenges. Yesterday, she told the grocery clerk that her mama lives in a big building far away, but sends her letters with pictures. How do you explain it to her? Tyler asked, joining us with Jamie on his hip. Our son, 15 months old, reached for Harper with chubby hands. Simply and honestly, Jake replied. Her mama made bad choices and has to live somewhere else to learn better choices. When she's older, we'll add complexity, but the foundation is truth. The dedication continued with speeches from Sarah Whitman about the foundation's work, from Caroline Foster about corporate integrity, from Emma about family healing. Each speaker wove their thread into the larger tapestry of transformation that Madison's crimes had inadvertently created. 2 announcements, Uncle Robert said as the formal program concluded. First, I'm stepping down as CEO. At 73, it's time. The board has unanimously selected Sean Chen as my successor, effective next month. The appointment shouldn't have surprised me given my work rebuilding the company's creative division and implementing ethical practices that had actually increased profits. But standing there holding Harper while my son played at my feet, I felt the weight of coming full circle. The company Madison had plundered to fund her schemes would be led by the sister she'd tried to destroy. Second, Robert continued, we've received a proposal from the Federal Bureau of Prisons. They want to partner with us for a work release program training inmates in legitimate business practices. The proposed liaison from the institutional side is Madison Hartley. Silence greeted this announcement. Madison helping run a program to teach business ethics to criminals. The irony was sharp enough to cut. She's completed her business degree inside, Robert explained, top of her class. Her thesis was on the psychological roots of white-collar crime. The warden says she's become their most effective peer counselor for fraud offenders. It could be another manipulation, Aunt Patricia said carefully. It could, Grace agreed, but the program would help other women avoid Madison's path, and she'd remain incarcerated just with a purpose beyond punishment. I think Dorothy would want us to consider it. The vote was scheduled for the next board meeting, but I already knew my answer. Madison teaching ethics was like an arsonist teaching fire safety, but sometimes the reformed criminal made the best reformer. She knew every trick, every rationalization, every step on the path to destruction. Maybe that knowledge could finally serve good instead of evil. As the event wound down, I found myself alone in the garden with Harper, who was determinedly trying to catch a butterfly. Pretty, she declared, pointing at the monarch dancing above the lavender. Very pretty, I agreed, and free. Free, Harper repeated solemnly, then brightened. Cookie! I laughed, producing the organic teething biscuit Jake had left with me. As Harper munched contentedly, I thought about freedom and its price. Madison had sought freedom through control, through taking what others had. But real freedom came from release, from secrets, from schemes, from the exhausting performance of being someone you weren't. There you are, Tyler said, joining us with Jamie. Family photo for the company newsletter. As we posed by Dorothy's plaque, 4 generations represented, if you counted the grandmother watching over us all, I felt the kind of peace I'd never known in my childhood. Not the false peace of swept-under-rugs dysfunction, but the real peace of acknowledged truth and chosen love. The photographer was Carolyn Foster, adding family historian to her many roles in our reconstructed clan. Beautiful, she said, showing us the image on her camera screen. Real smiles all around. That evening, our monthly family dinner took place in the company dining room overlooking the memorial garden. The tradition had evolved from trauma response to genuine connection with rotating hosts and recipe sharing. Tonight's menu came from Dorothy's handwritten cookbook, discovered in the same safe deposit box as her evidence against Madison. Before we eat, Grace said, I want to share something. Madison called today. She wanted me to tell you all that she's grateful for considering the work release program. She also said, Grace paused, visibly emotional. She said to tell Harper she loves her and thinks of her every day, and that she's learning to be someone Harper won't have to be ashamed of. To Harper, Uncle Robert raised his glass, and all the children who'll inherit better than we did. To Dorothy, I added, who planted seeds of truth that finally bloomed. To second chances, Jake contributed, and third and fourth ones for those who need them. To family, Emma concluded, messy, complicated, but real. As we ate Dorothy's recipes, Harper charmed everyone with her toddler antics, while Jamie watched with serious baby concentration. The conversation flowed naturally, touching on business and babies' memories, and hopes the past we'd survived and the future we were building. Sean's designing a meditation room at the prison, Tyler mentioned, part of the rehabilitation program expansion. It's a challenge, I admitted, creating calm in confinement, peace in punishment. But Madison sent detailed notes about what would actually help versus what administrators think would help. Her insights are surprisingly genuine. Prison changes people, Sarah observed, not always for the better, but when someone's ready to change, it can strip away everything false. Madison's manipulations required freedom, resources, victims. Without those, she's had to find out who she is at core. Who is she? Emma asked. At core, I thought about Madison's letters, increasingly frequent and introspective, about her descriptions of teaching literacy, of counseling, new inmates, of the simple satisfaction of a day without schemes, about her questions about Harper, her memories of Dorothy, her slow acknowledgement of harm caused. Someone who's learning, I said finally, late painfully, but learning. As dinner ended and families prepared to scatter to their homes, I stood once more in Dorothy's garden. The city lights twinkled below, each one representing lives and stories I'd never know. But I knew our story complicated and painful, and ultimately hopeful. Madison's toast 2 years ago had been to people who stayed in their lane. But lanes were meant to be traveled, not occupied. We'd all journeyed from where we'd been to where we needed to be. Even Madison in her narrow prison lane was moving forward instead of running in circles. The birthday girl's party had ended in handcuffs, but from that ending, so many beginnings had bloomed. A foundation helping fraud victims, a company built on ethics, children growing up with truth as their birthright, a family that had learned the difference between keeping peace and making it. Ready to go home? Tyler asked Jamie, sleeping in his arms. Almost, I said, touching Dorothy's rose one last time. Its thorns were sharp, but its blooms were sweet proof that beauty and pain could coexist, that protection and grace weren't opposites, but partners. Tomorrow, I'd step into the CEO role at the company Madison had tried to steal. Tomorrow, Jake would read Harper another letter from her incarcerated mother. Tomorrow, the work release program vote would determine if Madison could teach what she'd failed to learn until too late. But tonight, surrounded by family born of blood and choice, watching our children play where Dorothy's flowers bloomed, I felt the deep satisfaction of survival transformed into thriving. We'd been broken and rebuilt, scattered and gathered, deceived and enlightened. Most importantly, we'd learned that staying in your lane wasn't about limitation, but about choosing your direction consciously, honestly, with integrity as your guide and truth as your fuel. Madison had taught us that in her backwards way. By showing us everything we didn't want to be, she'd helped us discover who we were. The toast at our next family gathering would be different. To all of us, traveling our authentic paths together. 5 years had passed since Madison raised her champagne glass in misguided superiority. Now I stood in the nursery of the waterfront condo, painting the walls soft yellow for the daughter Tyler and I were expecting in 2 months. Jamie, now 6, carefully helped tape the edges, his concentration reminding me of Dorothy's focused attention to detail. Mom, tell me again why Aunt Madison can't visit us, Jamie said, not looking up from his task. I set down my paintbrush, choosing my words carefully. Remember how we talked about choices and consequences. Aunt Madison made choices that hurt people, so she has to stay in a special place to learn better choices. Like timeout. Like a very long timeout, I agreed, but she's using that time to help other people learn from her mistakes. The work release program had exceeded everyone's expectations. Madison had developed a curriculum called Breaking the Cycle from Fraud to Freedom that was now used in federal facilities across the country. Her blend of academic insight and personal experience reached inmates in ways traditional programs couldn't. The woman who'd once perfected manipulation now taught others to recognize and resist it. My phone buzzed with a message from Jake. A photo of Harper, now 7, at her school science fair with a project about butterfly metamorphosis. Her proud smile bore no trace of the chaos surrounding her conception and birth. Jake's consistent love and the extended family support had given her the stable childhood Madison never could have provided. She's asking more questions about her birth, Mom. Jake's text continued. I think it's time for a supervised video call. Madison had earned the privilege of video calls through 5 years of model behavior and genuine rehabilitation work. The request would need family consensus, but I already knew my vote. Harper deserved the chance to form her own understanding of the mother who'd loved her enough to let her go. Grace arrived with lunch, her movements sure and purposeful. At 68, she'd found her calling in victims' advocacy, her own story of enablement and awakening resonating with families torn apart by financial crimes. She set up our meal in the kitchen, the same space where Madison had once hidden stolen jewelry behind false panels. The parole board hearing is next month, Grace said without preamble. First eligibility review. Her lawyer thinks she has a real chance. How do you feel about that? I asked, joining her at the table. Complicated, Grace admitted. The mother in me wants my daughter free. The advocate in me knows some victims aren't ready to see her released. The person I've become believes in redemption, but not at the expense of accountability. What does Madison say? Grace pulled out her latest letter worn from rereading. She says she'll accept whatever decision they make. That freedom isn't about geography anymore. It's about finally understanding who she is without the masks. She's been accepted to a doctoral program she can complete inside focusing on restorative justice. She wants to keep teaching regardless. I thought about the strange turns life took. Madison with her doctorate in criminal rehabilitation. Me CEO of a company that had tripled in value through ethical practices. Grace, a voice for the voiceless. All of us transformed by the crucible of truth Madison's crimes had forced upon us. There's something else, Grace continued. She's written a book, a memoir. Every crime, every victim, every rationalization laid bare. She wants to publish it with all proceeds going to the Victims Fund. The publisher says it could help thousands understand how fraud really works from the inside. Staying in My Lane, A Journey from Deception to Truth, I read from the proposal Grace handed me. The title made me smile despite myself. Madison had taken her own poisoned toast and transformed it into something potentially healing. That evening, we held our family gathering in the garden atop the company building. Dorothy's roses bloomed in profusion, their scent mixing with the lavender and sage. Harper played with Jamie and the other cousins, her laugh bright and unself-conscious. The sight of her chasing butterflies, just as she had years ago, reminded me how some things remained constant, despite everything changing. "Can I have everyone's attention?" Uncle Robert called out, tapping his wine glass. At 78, he'd become the family patriarch, Dorothy's wisdom, living on through his steady guidance. I have an announcement. The board has voted to expand the work release program nationally. Madison Hartley will serve as program director, developing curricula and training instructors. She'll remain incarcerated, he clarified quickly, but her work will help hundreds of inmates find legitimate paths forward. It's the kind of legacy Dorothy would appreciate transformation from the darkest places. To transformation. Sarah Whitman raised her glass. The foundation she ran had helped over 300 fraud victims rebuild their lives with Madison's seized assets providing seed funding for small business grants. To accountability with compassion, Caroline Foster added. Her compliance consulting firm had become the gold standard for corporate ethics, born from her years documenting Madison's crimes. To family blood and chosen, Emma contributed. Her marketing firm now partnered with the foundation sharing stories of recovery and resilience. To Dorothy's roses, like I said, beautiful despite the thorns, or maybe because of them. As the evening progressed, Jake pulled me aside. I've decided about the video call. Harper needs to see Madison to understand that her mother is a real person, not a story or a cautionary tale. Will you be there for support? Of course, I agreed. We face truth together in this family now. Later, as I tucked Jamie into bed, he asked, Mom, do you think Aunt Madison is sorry? I think, I said carefully, that Aunt Madison has learned that being sorry isn't just words. It's changing your behavior, making amends where possible, and helping others avoid your mistakes. She's doing all of those things. Then she's sorry, Jamie concluded with 6-year-old certainty. Good. Everyone should get to be sorry and try again. From the mouths of babes, I thought kissing him goodnight. The simplicity of forgiveness through a child's eyes, uncomplicated by years of hurt and betrayal. Yet even adult forgiveness was possible, I'd learned. Not forgetting, not excusing, but releasing the poison of perpetual anger. Standing on the balcony of what had been Madison's showcase condo, now our family home, I looked out at San Francisco's lights reflecting on the bay. Somewhere across the city, Madison was probably preparing tomorrow's classes, teaching inmates to recognize the moment when ambition becomes obsession, when success becomes theft, when winning becomes losing everything that matters. Her birthday toast had been prophetic in ways she never intended. We had all learned to stay in our lanes, but those lanes led somewhere beautiful toward truth, toward healing, toward the kind of success that didn't require stepping on others to rise. Madison had discovered her lane led through consequences to redemption, a longer route, but ultimately the only one that arrived anywhere worth being. My phone chimed with a text from Madison sent through the approved system. Sean, thank you for supporting Harper meeting me. I dream of her often. Not of having her, but of her having the life I couldn't give. Tell her I'm learning to be someone she won't be ashamed to know. Tell her the butterflies she loves are proof that even the humblest caterpillar can transform. All my love, M. I saved the message to share with Jake and eventually Harper. Another piece of evidence that people could change, that the worst mistakes didn't have to be final verdicts, that sometimes the greatest gift was letting go of who you'd been to become who you were meant to be. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the company's expansion into international markets, Harper's video call with Madison, my daughter's impending arrival, the ongoing work of maintaining family bonds strengthened by truth but still tender from past wounds. But tonight, with my son sleeping peacefully and new life growing within me, I felt the deep satisfaction of a journey completed and another beginning. Madison had wanted to be special, to stand apart, to be remembered. She'd achieved all of that, just not how she'd imagined. She'd be remembered as the catalyst for transformation, the negative example that created positive change, the family failure who taught us all how to succeed with integrity. To viewers watching this story unfold, wondering about their own family secrets and dynamics, I offer this hard-won wisdom. Truth is like labor, painful, but necessary for new life. Secrets are cancer cells multiplying in darkness. Love without accountability is enabling. Accountability without love is cruelty. The balance between them is where healing lives. Has your family faced its own Madison? Have you been the enabler, The victim, or perhaps the perpetrator of manipulation disguised as ambition? What would happen if you chose truth over comfortable lies, accountability over false peace, genuine connection over performed perfection? Comment below with your own stories of family transformation. Like and subscribe if this journey resonated with your experience. Share with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to change course, to leave destructive patterns behind, to transform a legacy of lies into a foundation of truth. Thank you for witnessing our story. May your own path lead from darkness to light, from secrets to truth, from staying rigidly in lanes to finding the courage to change direction when needed. Remember, we all have the capacity for both Madison's destruction and Dorothy's wisdom. The choice of which to nurture is always ours. Until next time, dear viewers, may you find the strength to face hard truths and the grace to transform them into something beautiful. May your family gatherings be honest, your successes be ethical, and your love be both kind and accountable. Because in the end, the lane that matters most isn't the one that keeps you separate from others, but the one that leads you home to your truest self, surrounded by people brave enough to love the real you. That's the toast worth raising. To staying in the lane of authentic living where the journey itself becomes the destination. From our transformed family to yours, sending light and truth and the courage to choose differently. The story ends, but the lessons continue. Make them count.